Jansen raped and murdered 5 young girls.
I emptied 30 rounds into him. Lucy was the last.
Please don't hurt me.
Hi, I'm Evrenos. You're watching The Fan Carpet. Today we're at the Prince Charles Cinema for exclusive interviews with the talent behind a new horror film called Scar Tissue.
I think I first had the idea about 12 years ago, and then it's evolved over the years, and at various times it was sort of put away, and I let it sort of fester in the back of my mind, but then eventually wrote it a couple of years ago and got it made.
What first drew you to the script?
Well, gosh, it's I think I was interested in doing a project that was quite dark and to explore something a bit harder and more difficult than some of the worlds that I've inhabited before on screen.
What was it about it that made you kind of persevere for that long to want to, finish it and make it?
Well, I think it's such a fascinating subject, the whole idea of identity and nature versus nurture, what makes us who we are, what, when you read these appalling stories in the news, what is it that makes people do these things?
How does it feel to have your first feature film premiering now?
Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah, it's slightly peculiar because we shot it so long ago and I've done so many things since then. I've got to remind myself of what it's all about, but it's really exciting.
Danny came along, I think, fairly early on for the part of Luke, and we just immediately felt that he had that quality, because Luke needs a sort of dual quality. You have to instantly like him, but at the same time there has to be that just faint question mark in the back of your mind that is there something slightly darker about this character than we think.
Sam's a really interesting character. She's very layered and she's experienced deep and horrible trauma as a child, and so the opportunity to build a character like that is a great one. It's it's a very interesting role.
There were lots of people who came along who could do one aspect of the character but didn't sort of get the softer sides, and then when Charity came in, second she left the room, I just thought that is Sam.
The first time I met Charity was, I think I'd already been cast, and I was reading with several actresses that were coming in to read for the role of Sam, and always funny sort of things to do anyway, because I still feel like I'm figuring it out and I'm testing the waters with the part, trying a few things here and there. And when Charity came in, I don't know, something clicked. It's a kind of unspeakable thing that just sometimes it happens. And it was, I think everyone in there, after she left, we spoke about that. I think it was clear and evident that she was the right for the job, and she was great to work with. She's a lot more experienced than I was. So I learned a lot from working with Charity.
The thing about Charity is it's very different for her. She seized it because she'd done a lot of costume drama and whatever, and suddenly here she was, going outside her comfort zone really as an actress, and thoroughly seizing it. It was great when I first met her, in the canteen a couple of days before we started filming. She was very sweet. We were chatting away. And then of course we couldn't get anywhere near her during the shoot because she was so focused on being this character. It was great to watch the process.
Sam is a kind of hardened alcoholic, and Sam is, she's been in the police force, and she also does boxing as a hobby. So those are 3 very, very specific things that I had to sort of look into doing. And I'm not a method actor, but I did have to go to some boxing lessons, so that was quite interesting.
How do you learn to become a hardened alcoholic?
Not yet, but I'm on my way.
It's a thriller with horror elements, but it's also got science fiction elements. But overall, it's a dark thriller, I would say.
What was the process for you with the inspiration for the soundtrack of this film?
Oh gosh, lots of coffee, long walks, lots of long discussions with Scott. It was trying to find a sort of otherworldliness to it. You may have noticed looking at the film, it's not really set anywhere in particular. It's designed to sort of be a sort of slightly heightened reality, and that's what I wanted to do with the music as well. But it became very apparent sort of partway through the scoring process that in fact what I thought was more of a sort of horror thriller was actually a very personal story, with Luke and particularly with Sam, coming to terms with what had happened to her as a child. And Luke's sort of rather thrown into this maelstrom where he sort of suddenly finds out he is not who he thinks he is, or potentially not who he thinks he is, whereas Sam is just, she's trying to make sense of her whole life. And I suddenly realised a very human element into that, so I then got the string section in to sort of complement and soften the electronics a bit. So, but all these things, you know, whenever you go into something like this, it always evolves, and it's a journey of discovery and late nights, as I say, lots of coffee, just to work out where it's going to go.
What was it like to work with this director? What is he like?
It was great because Scott wrote the film, so it was wonderful to always have somebody on set that really intrinsically knew what was going on, where all of the characters were coming from. It was a shortcut all the time into kind of getting in the right mode and the right vein of mind for each scene.
Do you remember when you first found the horror genre? Like the first scary films that you ever saw?
Oh, blimey, lots of them. I can remember the remake of The Thing. First, hands being chopped off by teeth in chests and all sorts of things like that. I can remember being terrified by that as a kid.
I'm actually terrified of horror films. I hardly ever watch them, and I thought really when I was doing this that I might be too scared to actually come in and do the scenes. And I did have kind of quite a lot of nightmares when I was doing it, actually. So I'm a bit of a wuss, really. Yeah, I do. I remember watching loads of horror films as a kid because, like, it was a thing to do to kind of have sleepovers with your friends and then watch horror films. And I could always, I would always sort of hide behind the pillow, really. I'm completely useless.
It was shot entirely on location in London, mostly East London. We had a fantastic, spooky, disused hospital in East London, which we spent about 10 days in. Everybody getting lost in this massive, echoing chamber, just huge. You felt like it was full of ghosts.
In this country, we don't have a film industry. We have lots of little films, lots of little businesses, and so, you know, this film is made by Scar Tissue Limited. You know, so every time you make a film, you're a start-up, and that's part of the problem. It's very difficult, and you know, this is a low-budget British independent film, and everybody who's worked on it has put their heart and soul into it. You know, that's all you can do, and then you've got to go out there and sell it, and that's another whole new ball game. So it is a tricky business, yeah, absolutely.
I'm just a fan of British films, I think. I'm really in admiration of anybody that can get one together, and I really admire the guys that have made this film because, as Scott was saying just there in the Q&A, it's really, really hard. Funding's being cut all the time, so anyone that can really get their idea from script to screen, I'm a massive fan of.
That's it from us. You've been watching The Fan Carpet. Follow us on Twitter for the latest on the biggest films.